Our next guest has written extensively about the history of religion and the origins of belief. Reza Aslan, he's a religious scholar, commentator, and best-selling author. He gained attention around the world following a segment on Fox News that was labelled by one media outlet as the US network's most embarrassing interview ever.
Right, you're a Muslim, so why did you write a book about the founder of Christianity?
Well, to be clear, I am a scholar of religions with 4 degrees, including one in the New Testament and fluency in Biblical Greek, who has been studying the origins of Christianity for 2 decades, who also just happens to be a Muslim. So it's not that I'm just some Muslim writing about Jesus. I am an expert with a PhD in the history of religions. But I've been obsessed with Jesus.
Though. It still begs the question, why would you be interested in the founder of Christianity?
Because it's my job as an academic. I am a professor of religion, including the New Testament.
There's something, I could just watch that clip again and again. I don't know. Reza Aslan joins us now in the studio. Welcome.
Thank you. And I just want to say, I'm sure that there have been far more embarrassing moments in Fox News over the last couple of years.
Yeah, well, it's hyperbolic, but a significant claim even for that time. Now, Reza, you have been so born in the time in revolutionary Iran, born into a Muslim family. At 15, you became a Christian. You later on, through investigative and scholarly work on Jesus of Nazareth, you became a Sufi.
That's right.
And now I think are best identified as a pantheist. Is that right?
I think most Sufis would call themselves pantheists.
Yes. Okay,
pantheists.
So which one is better? You've had insight into all of them.
Which is my favorite.
Yeah. Which is
who's
better?
Going to heaven and who is not.
You're right.
So that's
we're all here for that.
Look, I think that the important thing to understand about religion is that it is first and foremost a matter of identity. In fact, it's far more a matter of identity than it is a matter of beliefs and practices. Before I came up here, I was reading the new government surveys about religiosity in Australia, and I saw that around 6 out of 10 Australians still identify themselves as Christian. I really doubt that 6 out of 10 Australians could tell you much about Jesus, except that he was born in a manger and died on a cross, or that 6 out of 10 Australians go to church on a regular basis, or
that's definitely
read the Bible on a regular
right.
basis. I think for the majority of that 60%, when they say I am a Christian, they're making an identity statement, and as a matter of their identity, it encompasses every aspect of everything that we've been talking about on this panel: their politics, their economic views, their social views. All of that is encapsulated in the phrase "I am Christian."
Right. Can you tell us what is the difference between faith and religion?
I love that question. Thank you. Because we too often, I think, confuse them as one and the same. People say things like, I believe in Islam, or I believe in Judaism, as though these are things to believe in rather than the thing that points to the thing to believe in. I think the important thing to understand is that faith is individualistic. It's ineffable. It's mysterious. The most up-to-date cognitive studies that we have indicate that faith is embedded in our brain. It's part of our cognitive
We're hardwired
awareness.
for
We're
it.
hardwired for it.
Right.
Exactly. Religion is just the language that we use to express faith. It's a language that gives us an opportunity to express what is fundamentally inexpressible. And I think too often they become confused with each other, and that's where we get a lot of this kind of, these conflicts of these irreconcilable absolutisms. When you believe in a religion, it becomes an end. And so I think that's where some of these problems lie.
So religion being the language, the symbols by which we can talk about.
That's right, a language of symbols and metaphors. Exactly, exactly.
Because Simone Weil, who I think corresponded for a long time with a priest and herself was trying to toss up whether she should be baptized or confirmed into a faith, made a similar point to that, because she was saying that for her belief, she saw as such intimacy. It was the language of the boudoir. It was the language, and that to even translate that into public was inevitably going to be an awkward thing to do that didn't translate. What's it like to write about Christianity, to write about Jesus of Nazareth as a zealot and a revolutionary, as a Muslim in the US?
Well, in many ways, to just take this language metaphor a little bit further, I think of myself as a kind of linguist. I feel as though so many of these different religions are saying fundamentally the same thing. They're expressing very similar sentiments, those sentiments that are, as we just said, part of the human condition. They're just using different symbols and different metaphors. And I've always thought of my role as the person who, being fluent in a lot of these languages, can help people understand that they're not saying things that are that different from each other. And I think for me, somebody who had experienced Christianity from the inside out and then began to study the historical Jesus and really recognize the dramatic differences between the historical Jesus and the Christ of faith, I wanted to write a book that not only addressed some of the things that a lot of believers take for granted about Jesus, some of the things that are not exactly historically accurate, but more importantly, I wanted to express to non-Christians why this guy is such a big deal. That whether you actually believe in him or not, whether you think he's the Messiah or the Son of God or God incarnate, that the person who lived 2,000 years ago, this poor itinerant day laborer who essentially started a movement that was seen as such a threat to the greatest empire the world had ever known that they hunted him down and tried him for treason and executed him as an enemy of the state, that person is worth knowing, whether you actually believe, the theology of it or not. And I think the most satisfying thing that I've heard from a lot of people is that non-believers especially, who say that this book is the first time that they got it. They suddenly understood why he's such a big deal.
It's very accessible, and that's probably why it kind of became a bestseller, I think. But if I can ask you about the language again, because can be quite blunt with your language as well, and
Yes.
you were sacked from CNN for calling the president Donald Trump a piece of beep,
Shit.
and yet so it must be of some source of irritation or concern to you that someone whose values you do not respect has the dominant majority evangelical support in the US. How has that happened?
For your viewers who may not be aware of this, 81% of white evangelicals voted for Donald Trump. That's more than voted for George W. Bush, who was a white evangelical. I have to constantly bring up this notion of whiteness because 67% of evangelicals of color voted for Hillary Clinton. These are people who believe the same thing, who hold the same theology, but just have a different skin tone.
Right.
So we cannot ignore the race aspect of the evangelical support for Donald Trump. It is a racially tinged support. At the same time, we also can't ignore the fact that this is a man who is demonstrably a racist, sexist, lecherous, pathologically lying, narcissistic sociopath.
So you like him?
Yes.
Right.
Who,
like him.
has been credibly accused multiple times of rape, and yet this is an evangelical base that of all his supporters dropped in almost every category except among white evangelicals. It's gone from 81% to about 79%.
Can I bring you in here, Greg Sheridan? Because on the flip side, you too have written a book that became a bestseller, which is called God is Good for You, A Defense of Christianity in Troubled Times. Now, Reza has written before about, and has spoken earlier about religion also being identity. How do you reflect, Greg, on what some see as the capture by the right of public expressions of faith and support for leaders like Donald Trump?
Well, I think Christians have got a bit too political in the US, although I think Christians are under increasing hostility and attack in Western culture now. Not comparable to the level of attack they are in elsewhere in the world. I mean, Christianity is by a very vast distance the most persecuted religion in the world, from Pakistan through to the Middle East and North Africa. Something like several hundred Christians are killed each week for their faith. I fundamentally disagree with Reza in his views about Jesus, and I don't think the scholarship bears his views out at all. It's an extremely eccentric position, not held by many serious scholars at all, to posit Jesus as a political revolutionary. But I do think that we're wrong to confuse Christianity with conventional politics. I mean, Christianity rests on supernatural claims, which are all through the gospel. Jesus himself says, before before Abraham, I am who am. You know, I watched Satan fall like thunder from the clouds, and so on, and makes all kinds of supernatural claims. And Christians have to be upfront about what they believe. If it's just a sort of kumbaya feel-good thing, then, you know, frankly, I'd rather be at the races. And of course, that doesn't imply hostility to other religions. Where I'd agree with Reza is I think that religious belief is hardwired into the human condition. And most religions are mostly true in their experience of God. So I'm married to someone who's not a Christian but who is a religious believer, and I profoundly respect her religious experience. And
Right,
I think Christians can be very, very happy about that.
Yes, and I just want